one of the smartest minds that I know. You know, to be blessed to have a guest roster today of two of the smartest people. I mean, Newt Gingrich last hour, Victoria Coates this hour. I needed all the brain power I could muster today because there's important stuff going on. And Victoria is now over at the Heritage Foundation, but previously she served as President Trump's Deputy National Security Advisor. She has authored a best-selling book called The Battle for the Jewish State, How Israel and America Can Win. And Victoria, thank you for kicking off the week with us.
Well, good morning, Chris. It's a great honor to be associated with the speaker in that way.
Well, I'm sincere when I say it. I didn't want to dive too deeply into what's going on between Israel and Iran right now because I knew we had you coming and you could say it better and have more insight. So let's start at the beginning and ask, is this a long time in coming, and the United States' role in it seems to be one, set the Democrats aside for a minute, among we conservatives, as you've read and probably understand, there seems to be healthy debate about what Israel's doing and our role therein. So could we just broadly talk about that and then focus in on the particulars?
Yeah, no, I think these are very legitimate questions that folks are asking. And yes, this has been a long time coming. You could say it almost 25 years coming since Iran initiated their nuclear program and started pursuing clandestinely military capabilities for that program. And I think what finally happened is after the 4 years of the Biden administration, which were extremely permissive for Iran, they didn't enforce the sanctions, so there was a lot of money flowing in. They went into what I've been calling a diplomatic doom loop of just endless sort of remote discussions, using the Russians as intermediaries. I mean, it was bad, and the Iranians made a huge amount of progress. We can actually track where they were in January of 2021 versus what we had in January of this year. Thousands more sophisticated centrifuges enriching uranium and plutonium, over 60%. There's no reason you have these things or you do this activity unless you're pursuing weapons grade. It's not necessary for a civil nuclear program. So I think that is what President Trump inherited. Obviously, the Israelis were extremely concerned about it. The president wanted to pursue diplomacy, and he did. He put a 60-day limit on it, and the Iranians thought that they were back in the doom loop and they could just kind of tap him along, as he says, and string this out. And he just finally said no, and the Israelis said, we're ready, this is our plan. And the Americans said, okay, we will support you defensively. We're not going to participate in the attacks on Iran, but we will support your defenses, and that's what's happened.
I just read this morning, and apparently Fox News is confirming from some source inside the Trump administration that Trump got involved, President Trump specifically got involved and told Israel not to take out their head dog, their big cheese over there in Iran, that they were about to, that Israel was going to, and that Trump, I think it's the Ayatollah, and that President Trump said, don't do that. I mean, I know you weren't in the room for the conversation necessarily, but does that sound plausible? I know Netanyahu was asked about it. He rebuffed the conversation and said there was no truth to it. But Fox said again this morning from the G7 that officials are saying that's what was said.
Well, this is the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, who's been the leader of Iran, I think, since 1989. So it's been a while, and he is obviously the head of the government, the top decision maker. And no, I wasn't in the room. The prime minister's denied it. There have been other denials. And then, yes, there have been these persistent reports. So, I mean, the fact of the matter is Khamenei is still alive. For all we know, he's theoretically in some bunker up near the border with Afghanistan with his family. So I think that's where he is for the moment. And, this would be typical or not atypical of President Trump. He wants the Israelis to have a decisive victory. As he said, sometimes he prefers diplomacy, but sometimes you got to fight it out. That appears to be what's happening, but he'd prefer not to have it escalate dramatically and drag us into it. So it's not impossible. I just can't confirm or deny.
There are a lot of people that I would say are on our side, people with whom we agree on most issues, 95, 98% of the time. But I'm noticing, and you've probably seen or read, I'm not going to invoke names, but if it's not that hard to figure out, those of you that want to go digging around in it, there has now become a real schism amongst conservative, if you want, thought leaders or commentators about Israel's action here. And I'm noticing a growing sentiment of Israel's out of line, Israel shouldn't have done this, versus others who say you're out of line for suggesting Israel should just sit there and do nothing. What do you make of this kind of growing sentiment that Israel is sort of the aggressor tone amongst conservatives?
Well, it's unfortunate because I think, as you said, we do agree 98% of the time, and I'd prefer not to have a circular firing squad on our side. And we need everybody. And that's one of the things about the Heritage Foundation is we do talk to everyone across the range, even some voices that are yelling at each other pretty loudly these days. We talk to everyone. And our message is that we do need unity, that support for Israel is in the United States' best interest. That is the direction the president has decided to go. We agree with him. And our most recent report on Iran, which came out about a month ago, we tried to point out that Israel has spent the last 20 months avoiding a wider regional war, and the Iranians have been the aggressors here. They're the ones who attacked Israel directly last April for the first time, or a year ago April for the first time, and then they did it again in October. So they're the ones that initiated direct kinetic combat between the two countries, and they're the ones who were behind October 7th, if we want to go all the way back there. So I mean, Israel has been the defender here and has not been the aggressor, but as the Prime Minister has said, we've had one Holocaust in the last 100 years. We cannot have another one. And the nuclear program had gotten beyond the pale, beyond where you could even make a reasonable case that it was peaceful. And so for that reason, President's red line of not letting them get a nuclear weapon, we've tried to point out that historically a direct targeted action against Iran has not led to a broader conflagration or direct attacks on Americans, and that has held so far. So we'll see how far Israel wants to take this, what else they want to degrade inside of Iran. But as President Trump said yesterday, at some point we're going to have to come to a diplomatic end to this. And I think that's probably what he'll start working on.
Victoria Coates with us. The Battle for the Jewish State is her latest book. She was the former Deputy National Security Advisor to President Trump in his first term. She's over there at the Heritage Foundation now. I'm a simple guy, and to me, we all understand Iran hates Israel. They hate the Jewish state. They want them wiped off the map. They've never made any secret about that, and they're working toward getting a nuclear weapon. And so for people that are opposed to Israel striking, they say this is going to create World War III. Is this going to create World War III? I mean, I don't know. Is Israel supposed to just sit there and wait? I think that's the thing that I've struggled with. I say respectfully to people that disagree with Israel's actions here. What are we to do? Wait until Iran becomes fully nuclear and act only after they have? I think that's what I don't necessarily grasp.
That's really the crux of the matter, Chris, is at what point do you have to take a preemptive action because your national survival is at risk? And that the other issue here is, yes, the Iranians have been very clear that they want to wipe the Jewish state off the map. But guess who's next? And in their worldview, Israel's the little Satan, but we're the big Satan. And if you're going on a crusade against Satan, just because you get the little one doesn't mean you don't go on and go after the big one. And so the problem is that even if we abandoned Israel or we restrained Israel and we told them don't go after the nuclear program, that they would then develop a nuclear bomb and not just use it on Israel, but use it on us. And we also have the horrible problem that you've been very attentive to, also inherited from the Biden administration, of our wide open border for 4 years, and heaven knows what crept across the southern border. We know Iranians on the terrorism watch list have come into the country. What sleeper cells do they have here? And what might they smuggle to them if they had access to a nuclear weapon? So this is not just dangerous for Israel, it's dangerous for the United States. And I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know how all of this is going to pan out. But, the combination of Israel and the United States dwarfs any capabilities Iran might have. So I think it is very much in our capability to prevent this from becoming World War III. And if it did broaden out, I think we could win it pretty decisively and pretty quickly if we had to.
I knew this was going to be a big conversation, which is why I asked if you'd be kind enough, and you were kind enough to stick around for a second segment, because I have some more questions about the meaning of this broadly. Victoria Coates with us from the Heritage Foundation, former Deputy National Security Advisor to President Trump in his first term. We're going to take a quick break, and then I'm going to pick the brilliant brain of Victoria Coates a little more here on The Stigall Show. Sit tight. Bret Baier talking to Benjamin Netanyahu over the weekend. Take a listen.
So is regime change part of the effort here?
Could certainly be the result, because the Iran regime is very weak. I think it's basically left with two things. It's plans to have atomic bombs and ballistic missiles. That's basically what Iran has. They certainly don't have the people. 80% of the people would throw these theological thugs out. I mean, they murder them, they oppress them for 46
That's good. So, Victoria, and I welcome you back. Thank you so much for hanging on. Former Deputy National Security Advisor to President Trump. She's at the Heritage Foundation now and author of The Battle for the Jewish State. So you just heard Benjamin Netanyahu there. They've been pretty consistent on the Israeli side. We don't mean ill to the Iranian people. Do you know that to be true? 80% of that country would like to be rid of their government?
Yes, I think that is the crux of this issue, and President Trump has talked about this too. When he announced that he had written the letter to the Supreme Leader, he talked about how great the Iranian people are, how they've been a friend to the American people, and historically, if we even go back to biblical times and Cyrus the Great, they've been the friend of the Israeli people and the Jewish people, and so I think that's kind of the irony here, is that Iran should be a great and good friend to both Israel and the United States. I've written in the Jerusalem Post about having a Cyrus Accords to go along with the Abraham Accords between Iran and Israel. It's the most logical thing in the world. The irritant is this regime, which for now almost 50 years has been sowing mayhem and violence. And one of the really interesting things here is that Israel is enjoying the defensive support of our Arab partners in the Gulf. It's been credibly reported that Saudi Arabia and UAE and Bahrain and Azerbaijan and a number of countries in the region have assisted in the defense of Israel against the drones and missiles that Iran is firing at them. So in a way, you're seeing the region unite behind Israel and President Trump.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that is something that's been on my mind. That swing through the Middle East Trump took just a few weeks ago, do you see them as related at all, given what's going on now, or just a happy accident?
No, I don't think there are a lot of happy accidents in this line of work. And so I think that trip was very carefully planned, the way his first trip in the first term was carefully planned to send a message. And what that trip sent was that we need all our Gulf partners and allies. And that was Saudi and Qatar and UAE, that he needed all three of them. And all three of them have been, as I said, participating in this defense of Israel along with the United States.
Because he knew this was coming, and they were, in fact, it sounds like, talking about this, even though Trump was sort of publicly calling Israel off. Privately, they thought this day would come.
They knew it was possible. And so, that was a way for the president to, carry messages from Israel of what was intended, what was possible, get everybody, as I said, on the same page. Nobody should be surprised by any of this. And it is also hugely in the best interests of Gulf partners and allies to get the Iranian situation under control, because they're threatened too. Remember, that Iran has directly attacked both Saudi Arabia and UAE in the last couple of years and caused considerable damage. And so they don't want them to go nuclear either.
And bottom line, with about a minute, do you think this escalates to something greater than Iran and Israel? I mean, does Iran have a death wish here? Because certainly if they strike anything related to our interests, that being our men and women, our diplomats, what have you, this does escalate. It gets us involved, which is what a lot of critics on our side say is exactly what Trump should try to avoid. What do you say to that?
Oh, I agree with him that we should try to avoid that. And hopefully Iran will not be that stupid. They haven't historically. They've tended to back down when shown, credible military force. And they know they've pretty much fired all their bullets. This is what they can do. They can send drones and missiles. And we've had some casualties in Israel, but they're running out of missiles at this point. And so they don't really have a lot of other capabilities. So, if there were a spectacular terrorist attack, yes, it would be, as October 7th kind of situation, we would have to respond. But I think that show of force that the president has demonstrated and the arrival of the Nimitz, the third aircraft carrier in the region, is a very strong signal not to escalate any further. So I think we can keep that in the box.
The Battle for the Jewish State is Victoria Coates' book. It is a must-read at this particular time in history. Deputy National Security Advisor to President Trump, she was in the first term. Victoria, thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris. Take care.
The Chris Stigall Show podcast.